my orientation, my brought up, is that there are some things that are unthinkable. When Nigeria got its independence in 1960, the first major protest that happened in this country was against the defense pact between Nigeria
with the US.
And the United Kingdom, actually. And they said, we cannot struggle and fight for our independence, and then 2 years later, you are signing a defense pact. We can't accept it. And it was led by the West African Students' Union. And since then, Nigeria had never had any defense pact with any country. Even at the height of this of the polarized world of the Cold War.
The Cold War.
Nigeria never did. And the best Nigeria actually did was to be a non-aligned. And if you remember very well, even in the Second Republic, Nigeria was not aligned. Because First Republic, Nigeria was not aligned because Nigeria felt that even being in non-aligned movement is an alignment.
Position.
It's a position that you are actually taking a position being even in non-aligned movement. And many of us felt that, because it was a very conservative government that was very responsible, they decided not to be non-aligned. They don't want to follow other African countries and all that. And we blame Balewa's government for that. At least later, some of us weren't there when Balewa was in power. But this is a kind of story. This is the history of the country. But today, even without any agreement, we are saying, come and bomb.
No, I mean, even before the bombing, you will agree with me that some people were already saying, look, is it not better for us to go back, colonial times?
Yeah, exactly.
And, I think it's also a reflection of the trust that is diminished in citizens with those, whether they forced themselves or they were elected by the people over time, the gradual erosion.
Absolutely. This is part of the governance thing. You see, governance, when we say you govern well, it's not simply because people want one thing or the other. I think it's basically around strengthening your legitimacy and ensuring the required trust between the state and the civil society is actually there. Because there are contexts where the states actually need the society. And once that trust breaks down, it erodes the capacity of the state. And this is what we are seeing increasingly in Nigeria. And this is why I say that we're dealing with a major crisis that sometimes we'd rather deal with them by their labels: banditry, herder farmers, communal conflicts, religious violence. We'd love to use that. But there's a much more deeper social crisis that is brewing, that is making conflicts intractable. Look, Boko Haram crisis is 15 years old. Government has done so many things wrong. There were several missteps around it. But there are structural factors that sustains it. And that's the dynamics that many of us, analysts and conversations, will never get to. We actually think that the solution to this thing is more bombs, more arms, more soldiers, more that. And then
more forest guards.
More forest guards, more police, more that. And when you do that, you're actually saying more contracts, more money to some of these politicians' pockets.
It's an industrial complex now.
It's an industrial complex. But that's exactly it. It's an industrial complex. So it's a politician security industry complex. Because we don't have strong arms manufacturing here. So the security profiling and everything, insecurity in this, in that. Insecurity is a symptom. It is a symptom of a bigger crisis that we are dealing with. And therefore, as much as it's important to deal with the symptom, you should always know that you can't eradicate it by actually dealing with the symptom. You must deal with the underlying causes. It's like a medical doctor, you are treating malaria, and what you are just doing is taking paracetamol for the fever. You just know that you will soon die of malaria. And I think this, for me, is what I'm not saying.
I mean, you can be treating malaria from now, forever, but you've not cleared your drain. So the mosquitoes will continue to reproduce.
And that's why in the last 25, 26 years, and I love to go further because I don't also like the idea that people think that it's democracy that has led to this space of violence that we're experiencing. And I'd love to remind Nigerians that, look, we ate the forbidden fruit in 1987 when the Kafanchan crisis escalated in northern Nigeria. And since then, the crisis in the school in Kafanchan was just a trigger. But there were brewing social crises. It coincided with the introduction of structural adjustment program in 1986. There was a massive withdrawal of the state in terms of service provisioning. The trust between the states and the citizens begin to wane. And you know, when you don't deal with it, it keeps growing. It's like cancer. It will keep growing. So it's just that probably it got to a peak under a democratic rule or civil rule, and then governance has become more irresponsible. Corruption has become democratized. And yeah, you know, so I think that's now the lawlessness actually dipping, because politicians don't actually like to operate in a very controlled environment because they can't do their thing. So they actually promote this level of lawlessness. I hope I'm not speaking up to you about my book that was coming out very soon.
Please tell us more about it. We'll love to. So now, let me take you into the realm of elections. What's your prognosis for us in 2026? And within the context of this insecurity we've been discussing, do you think the elections will become more securitized to conduct, free, fair, acceptable elections in an environment where there is insecurity over perhaps more than half of Nigeria right now?
Politics has been spun since the president was sworn in May 2023. To be honest, I don't think that this government has settled enough to even govern. I think that since the government was sworn in, everything that has happened has been really, really shaped by 2027 general elections. And so I think this started, if you look at from the wave of the campaign of governors through members of the National Assembly, the alignment and realignment that are happening and all that, really it's been politics all through the last 2.5 years or more. Naturally, it's the election year for the country. And so there will be more political activities happening. At the moment, bordering what we are seeing is everybody carrying their bags and baggages and saying our home is APC. And that's where they are going. And virtually every government is doing. The most current one is the contention going on in Kano at the moment. And many of us were there. We are already watching and paying attention to what is happening since between the governor Abba and his principal Kwankwaso. And of course, the narrative we are hearing is that the governor wants to go to APC because he wants to secure his seat for the second term, and he believes that it's only within the APC rank that he could win the second term. He's very wary, particularly what happened after the last elections and the court judgment and all that, and how he escaped by whiskers. And so he feels that the APC, without being in APC, he may not be able to win the next election. His principal is thinking differently. He's being more strategic. He wants a more negotiated exit and engagement. He wanted to be sure what is in there for him and all that. And it's like they are both having their ways and or parting their ways, and probably in the next few days, or if not next few hours, we may hear that the Kano State governor had decamped. Before him, you had in the northern part of the country, you saw Taraba, you have what happened in Plateau and all that. And so everyone, now what we are seeing in the entire 3 zones of northern Nigeria, you probably, or the old northern Nigeria, let me not hurt my middle best friends. The entire 3 zones of the old northern Nigeria is what you'll find is probably Adamawa, where you have a PDP, then you have Bauchi with PDP, and then you have Zamfara State, where you also have PDP. So out of 19, you have 3 states, PDP, and then Kano, NNPP, so 4. So 15 of the states are APC states. And when you go to the old southern part of the country, where you probably find is Anambra, which is ABGA. And ABGA is actually in alliance with APC.
With APC.
So ABGA is alliance. So in national election, it is ABGA, it is APC. In the local state election, then it is ABGA. And then you have ABIA, which is Labour Party, and as it is at the moment, probably that party does not exist. Yeah. And then Oyo State in the southwest, you still find PDP there. So which is completely different from when the elections were held in the last time, 2023. The number of governors that some of these parties control. So as it is looking, it's like everyone is moving into that. And the opposition side, it is still not looking very clear. To be honest, PDP is struggling with the crisis of fragmentation, and is actually virtually on its knees. I can't understand why a party that is actually on its knees is still expelling some of its strategic members or suspending them, like people like Sule Lamido, who would have probably given
some life.
Yeah, give it some life, and it's been suspended. So it's on its knees. Same thing for Labour Party. I don't think Peter Obi is any much a member of that party anymore. And it wasn't in the real sense of it as a political party. Yeah, it ran election, but its last outing, it was more like a movement than a party. So it was a movement that found a platform, which was the Obi's movement that found a platform in the Labour Party. So by the time you take the Labour Party and you minus the movement, it's practically non-existent.
It's just a sham. Yeah.
It's a sham. And so now you have other oppositions coalescing into the ADC. All the major opposition elements within the APC are moving to APC, and then there are some PDP elements also, and there are a few Labour Party people who are also moving into that platform. I think it is quite difficult to build a party now for the next election. I think it is quite difficult to build a party for the next election in 1 year, particularly in the context where you have to manage so many contentious issues and individual politicians' interests, particularly those who want to run for election, whether for presidential elections or for gubernatorial elections. Many of our politicians don't care much about building institutions. They are more interested in what is in need for them. So even people who are struggling to get the ADC running, in the next few months, if they find out that it's not gaining the right traction, some of them may even leave to join APC if they think that their interest will be guaranteed that way. So at the moment, there is none. And then the APC is also chewing or taking more than it could chew. And therefore, it will also be consumed by its own internal contradictions. That consumption or that implosion may not happen before the next elections, but it will happen immediately after the next election. Because we've also seen that with PDP and how the PDP practically absorbed or took over the ANPP and the what do you call?
Yes, Alliance for Democracy. AD.
Sorry, AD.
Yeah.
So you see how PDP took all others, and then eventually now it's the same PDP that has become so pitiable at the moment. But again, beyond this analysis of where the political parties are, I still want to believe that the next election will still be a contest.
With who now? With who?
That's the issue. Now with who? The way elections runs in this country is that it operates within the particular binary. And there are two dimensions of it. One is a binary that, look, we don't like this government in power. And we want to make do with anyone that is seen to be a bit formidable, even if it's not strong enough. Yeah. Everybody will go towards that direction. Is particularly so when there is no vacancy in the state house. So when probably if after a second term, like what happened in 2023, you can have multiple platforms because people see opportunity and all that. But with this one, there is an incumbent that is running. It's not gonna be that easy for that incumbent, but it's gonna be different from what happened in 2015. Because at the 2015, you had a political party that took about 3.5 years to prepare. It was very ready. Yeah. It was properly organized and was able to mobilize different segments of the country, including the civil society, and actually were able to defeat the incumbent. But I don't see that kind of organization happening in the next election because the party was actually not ready. There is no opposition party in the moment. And then the people who are actually leading the opposition are also people who have been mainstreamed in the politics of the country. So they have been very mainstream. People can easily say, oh no, it's the same people. But what I see happening is that once it is clearer and the candidate emerge from one side, people who don't want to support the government of the day will move towards that direction. The other dimension of it is that the voters turnout will even become worse than we had in 2023. Because again, people just feel, oh, these people are not organized people. They cannot even organize themselves. Why should I go and waste my time? Or they cannot even win the election because we didn't have a strong political party. And so people don't come out to vote. And that will be quite shameful because the last outing was very poor and this next one could actually become much poorer. I think the conversation at the moment is around where the president comes from. I think this is what is also scaring the Obi's movement, whether to join the ADC or not, in my understanding, because there is no guarantee that they are going to allow him to run. And there is this scare, there is the Atiku factor. And Atiku factor has been there since 2003. In every election, the Atiku factor will always come. And it has been historically very difficult to beat Atiku in party primaries. It's been historically very difficult to do that. The last time that happened, quite seriously, was at least in the fair contest, was in with Buhari in 2004, the Lagos APC primary
convention.
Yes, convention where he lost to Buhari. But otherwise, whatever kind of arrangement. So there is that Atiku factor that is discouraging the other side from getting into it. But I also think that if you look at our geopolitics, it wouldn't make sense, to be honest, for a northern contest, for a northerner to run against
the incumbent president.
Yeah, for the incumbent president, I don't really think that it will make sense. It is not good for the country, at least within our geopolitics. I don't really think that is good enough. But politicians sometimes don't think around that, and this is part of our problem. This is part of what is increasing the tension and the polarization that we experience. I don't also think that Peter Obi should go around and be saying that they should allow him and that he will do one time. I don't really think that anyway.
I think that's political naivety, to be honest.
It's quite naive. It's quite naive. And this was what cost Goodluck Jonathan. This story is not in the public domain. This cost Goodluck Jonathan in 2015 election. To get his 20 to 2011 elections, he cut a deal. He said he was not going to run.
Yeah.
He said he was not going to run, and some of us knew, some of us are aware
Yeah.
And then as they got closer to the next election, he said he didn't do that. So, so
I mean, I've tried to speak to the obedient people so
yeah,
far, but I feel it's a mismanaged opportunity for
yeah,
Peter Obi. As the Labour, he had the Labour Party eating on it from his palm, really.
yes, yes.
But I feel he has not managed the
He
politics
didn't
of the
manage. He
Labour
didn't
Party.
manage the relationship well, and this is also what happened many times. But what happens to us, and this I have seen with many politicians. What happened to any politician in Nigeria seriously depends on the people he has or she has around him.
Around him, yeah.
Yeah, I think Obi didn't have the right caliber of people around him.
No,
He may
but
have,
I disagree with you,
yeah,
Hussein. Why do
yeah,
I disagree with you?
yes,
It is also incumbent on a leader to
yes,
find those people, because
yeah,
this thing is not rocket science.
yes.
He should learn
I think we're
from.
saying we're saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing because
Yeah,
leadership, the basic thing around leadership, your leadership is as good as your recruit.
exactly.
So the people you have around you are a reflection of who you are.
Of who you are. Yeah.
And that's what, for me, on Obi's side, that capacity to get the right set of people across the country, get them who can actually help you organize, because they should have been able to keep the Labour Party intact. And at this moment, people will not be talking about ADC and other parties because you have the Labour Party intact. And then if you know this country very well and you are a good student of Nigerian partisan politics, you also know that the Labour Party is an unstable party.
Yeah.
And so what you will need to be doing with that Labour Party is how to get stability for the party. And that means that you need resources. You need to keep the bureaucracy of the party. You need to keep it intact. You need to keep it very in a friendly relationship with the political arm of the party. You need that. And when you lose election, I think it's just about it is to prepare for the next one if you are interested in the next one. So you don't have a break. See, Buhari probably, and in my knowledge of him, Buhari will probably have been elected president long before 2015 if you had had the right people around him.
Yeah.
He didn't have that. He could win this because the dynamics changed. In 2015, the dynamics changed, and there were new forces, and you could see the forces that were expelled from the Buhari cycle were so angry.
Yeah.
There were so many of them. I don't want to mention some of them who are my friends.
One of them is my good friend.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of them were part of Buhari's problem in those days. And the same thing had happened to Atiku. You understand? The Atiku's people that were with him in government, and you see them dropping, and the quality of the people around him kept waning, and that has also impacted him. The same thing for Goodluck, even while he was a president. So I really think that our politicians are not managing things well. Part of the crisis we're experiencing, including the violence that we're experiencing in the country, also is a reflection of the quality, the capacity of the leadership we have. And leadership here is not simply around even those in government, even those in opposition. So we are not seeing that much around, but I worry about the next election. Honestly, I worry about it. I worry that it is looking like there wouldn't be contest, but also because I knew the partisan binary that drives Nigerian politics. I still believe that there will be some contentions. I honestly think that if Atiku listens, I really think that he should be working with a strong candidate from the southern part of the country that can get into the fray to contest the next election. I wouldn't probably feel that he should. But again, when politicians always think about who can win, they think who can win, and there is sometimes this naive understanding that the Northerners is only a Northern candidate that can defeat the incumbent. And they create a narrative that Northerners, we always vote around certain
religious sentiments,
regional lines, and therefore you can win. You know, there are several dynamics that shapes that voting pattern. They don't vote. They will not vote in that pattern for everybody, and that's what you should remember. Not everyone can be a Buhari.
That's true.
And the way in which that people were voting for Buhari in that mass is not necessarily ethnic, religious, or
I think it's more because of his Spartan lifestyle.
Exactly. People have their expectation of a politician, and they saw that in him, and that is why they could go and do that and consistently do that for him. And so there is no Buhari replacement at the moment in northern Nigeria. So there is that does not exist. So I think it's very simplistic to actually sit there and think that it's only a northern candidate that could do that. I actually think that the opposition need to put their acts together.
Yeah. I mean, to your point that there is no Buhari replacement, I think our politicians should also take a lesson from the Southwest. You see, when Awolowo died, it was that same question. Of course, you know, his political associates, you know, still kept together, sort of. But the way Awolowo held sway over the entire Southwest, there was no single individual that had that level of popularity. People came sometime, you know, before Tinubu did his own political machinations, and
which was not rooted in the Southwest.
You know, it wasn't rooted in the Southwest. And
that a lot may not agree with me, particularly people who didn't study this thing quite well may not agree with me. But I think that the northern Nigeria had never produced a politician like Buhari.
Yeah.
You see, the truth about is now when you look at his performance in government, will make you feel otherwise.
Yeah.
He did extremely poorly as a president.
Yeah.
So there is no excuse for Buhari's performance. I actually think that it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it missed it within the first 6 months, because the first 6 months of Buhari coming into government, people felt, you know, people sat up, you know, and then gradually said, okay, there's really nothing.
Buhari was a really a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity for a reset, having an unconventional politician with his stature, with the kind of support base, particularly from northern Nigeria. There are some critical decisions that could have actually been taken that ordinarily wouldn't have been questions that could put this country on the right track. And that when he even was not feeling too well, I feel he shouldn't have actually bothered about going for the second term. But again, when you get into that place, you are a captive. And why did I say that he's quite one of the greatest producers? I think he embodied both the Sardauna and the Aminu Kano's kind of politics.
Yeah.
He didn't have, I don't think that he had their intellectual capacity. He didn't have the Aminu Kano's depth, to be very honest, as a radical politician. He didn't have the depth of Aminu Kano as a radical politician. And then he didn't also have the cultural finesse of a conservative politician of Ahmadu Bello, but he has the mass base that combines the two. So there were limits to areas where the NPC was actually winning elections in northern Nigeria, and there were limits to where NEPU and later PRP was actually winning elections, but Buhari's politics has won election in those spaces. So he combined that too, that he embodies it without strong intellectual capacity. And I'm not saying that he wasn't a knowledgeable person, but what I'm saying is that these two, Ahmadu Bello and Malam Aminu Kano, were politically conscious people. And what they were doing in their politics They were doing it with all levels of consciousness.
Mm.
Malam Kano was very clear about what he wants to transform. His engagement with the native authority and then the colonial system, his connections with the Talakawa and all those things. The same thing for Amadou Bello. He was also very, very conscious. He was very highly northern centric. He knew what he wanted for northern Nigeria, even if people are calling him names.
Yeah,
He didn't care for another part of, and he was ready to take the bullet from the other. So these were two different Aminu Kano and Sadona, friends, of course, but they were politically, ideologically different. So Buhari didn't come with that ideological understanding. He has no clear connections on that, but he has a mass base. He had a mass base. So it's so difficult to find someone like him. And I think no other politician who wants to be a Buhari is just deceiving himself. He's not going to work.
No, I think the thing is everyone should chart his or her own course.
Exactly.
Just be yourself. Be true to whatever ideology you. I mean,
and that was Buhari's thing. And I always relate Buhari with Trump in the sense that his street awareness and that populist inclination.
Yeah.
Except that Buhari doesn't have the Trump's marketing capacity, the public engagement capacity. But with his few words, he can speak. He spoke the language of the streets. He makes a sentence and he connects directly with the streets, particularly the streets of northern Nigeria. And even the perception of his the religious toga around him and all those things were informed by that connections with the street. It doesn't have to do anything with his own personal idiosyncrasies, but it was that because Islam and other related religious issues are connected to the street.
To the streets. That's
to the street of northern Nigeria. So he was a street populist, yet not a very engaging person. He's not as your person you will see every day. But when he speaks, when you listen to him in Hausa language, like I tell someone, I say he reminds me of my grandfather, or he reminded me of my grandfather. He says some of those things.
Yeah. Now,
Actually, it reminds us more. It's almost the same thing as what I was saying earlier. That in this country, for some of us who are very passionate about it, what you think was an abomination, that was unthinkable, that cannot happen, that it just comes to pass, and with nothing. And that's my reaction to this tax law. Yes, Nigeria tax to GDP ratio is one of the poorest. And again, it is not because the tax collection is poor, even though the corruption in there, but it's also because of the nature of the economy. You can run an economy that is almost 90-something% informal and also actually be able to have a good tax ratio. Nigerian Labor Survey actually tells us that only about 7% of Nigerians are formally employed. And it doesn't tell us exactly the nature of the economy, but it gives a clear sign of what it is. It means that 93% of employed Nigerians are actually employed in the informal sector. And what does make the sector sometimes very informal is the fact that it is so difficult to track. There are so many things around it and all, and therefore tax collections can become a bit difficult. So when we are trying to improve our tax collection, it's not a bad idea to improve our tax collections. And I have been in that line of argument probably for the past 15 years or more, or saying that we need to pay more tax, government need to be more responsible, and then we need to demand for the government to do better with the tax that we're paying. But you can't tax poverty. And that's always very important to recognize. So when the tax law emerged, and there are three pieces of laws that we today describe as tax laws. And it generated a controversy, like you mentioned, and some people objected to it, but eventually it got passed. But when it got passed, a few weeks ago, it just came to the realization that what was passed in the harmonized version of the joint sittings of the two houses of the National Assembly, that they have doctored it, and a lot of changes were made to it. And what was made to it was what was gazetted. And therefore, you now have a law that was not passed by the National Assembly. That's the implication. And that act itself is criminal. And that's my worry, that it was almost like nothing. What happened, if you look at the details, are not clerical errors. Even clerical errors, when they happen and there is no clarity, is still sent back to the National Assembly for clarification before they are gazetted. But this one is not clerical errors. In fact, areas that were doctors, that areas that actually have to do with accountability. What happens if you don't pay, how tax officials can arrest you without even court, without any going to court, how the tax authorities is not answerable to ministerial control or all those things. That's the kind of things they change. And so it gives you that sense of deliberateness. And the message I get from this is that could it be that has happened to some other laws, historically or now, or in this government? That's the first one. The second part of it is that the committee that was managing this process from the executive side are complicit. I believe that they did this, but I also believe that they did it with some selected members of the National Assembly. I believe they did that quietly with those selected members of the National Assembly. It is not something that one individual can go and sit down and make these changes. It does not mean that the president is aware. If you know how this country is run, it doesn't mean that the president is aware, but there are people who actually see themselves being the future leaders of this whole process, who are part of the committee and who actually have an agenda. They wanted things done in a different manner, and therefore the law did not satisfy them the way it was passed, and they have to make those amendments. And then they got some members, a few members who may have been induced to actually get into that without the knowledge of even other members of the committees that worked on the bill or the larger assembly. And it may involve the presiding officers of the two houses. In my opinion, it may actually involve the presiding officers of the two houses. And this is what I fear about the nature of our assembly, particularly the Senate, when governors are becoming too many in the Senate. Because the governors are too used to running their states without the state house of assemblies. The assemblies are in their pocket, and they give the assemblies what to do. They are clear. And once it comes back from the assembly and they didn't even do it correctly, they will correct it and they will pass it into law. So when you have such people becoming too many in the assembly, you actually lose the basic principles that defines the National Assembly or a parliament. So you have a tax law, something as important and also as contentious as it, and there are multiples of it, and Nigerians are not clear which of them that you claim to have regazetted. So that's a problem. We have a problem, and that worries me a lot about this country. If anybody can sit down, even if this person is a Senate president or Speaker of House of Reps,
or even the president of the country,
or even the president of the country can sit down and change remove to a bill that was passed by the two houses that is just waiting for presidential assent to become a law? No.
I think this also calls for something to be done on the part of civil society, since we are always out there demanding transparency and accountability. Subsequent to this now, it should be a demand by civil society when a bill is passed by the National Assembly after the harmonization. Publish the full thing you are sending, you are transmitting to the president for assent. Because I watched Taiwo Oyedele, and it's like, he kind of put it down to, it's, from the Ministry of Justice. The process of transmitting from the National Assembly to the Ministry of Justice is by itself susceptible to a lot of manipulation, So there shouldn't be controversy about this is what the National Assembly passed, and this is what was transmitted to the presidency. The president and his team, they have every right to question one provision or the other, send it back to the National Assembly. That is what they are there for, So, because right now there are probably about three, there are more than two versions.
Yes, there are more than two versions. There will be 3 or 4 different versions of it. There was the one they sent to the National Assembly. And then there were those that the National Assembly agreed with them, and then they made changes, working the National Assembly Committee and the Tax Committee worked on, which was returned, which was debated. And then there was the one that was passed eventually and sent for presidential assent. And then there was the one, like what we heard, that the president actually assented. And then there was also another one that is the one that we are seeing that they're actually selling on the street, which now has so many subtractions and additions.
Well, and it's been quite an interesting time with you today. And, I think we've covered a lot, from the security issues to elections, to the politics of, Nigeria, and now the tax issues. In closing, if you were to have the ears of the president, or let me say leaders of Nigeria, what would be 3 things you would ask them to prioritize for the year 2026?
When I actually first, I will ask them to prioritize security, and without necessarily getting into these massive securitizations conversations. And I'm not strong on this conversation around kinetic or non-kinetic. I actually think it's a very lazy way to understand and explain on how to manage security. And because, yes, it's natural. Now, sometimes you fight, sometimes you don't fight. So it's a natural process. But I think that we have technicized these kinetic and non-kinetic things, and therefore kinetics mean going
to carry big grammar.
Yes, exactly. So born a blazing, and then the other one is about negotiating. I don't actually think that this is it, but I think we need to prioritize it. And there are so many dimensions of these prioritizations. One is that how do we take governance back to the local areas? How do we invest in terms of strengthening intercommunal harmony and relationship building? Many times, I think that we haven't had a more comprehensive approach to this. And I think we have to take it as a national process and involve everyone, state governors, different entities that are very important in managing this. And like what I've been I said for almost 10 years now, right from the time Buhari was in government. And I said, can we have a national convergence on security? Can we have it, a single agenda item? Is it possible to have, cross-sectoral engagement, politicians, parliament, civil society, security agencies, all of us? Can we have a conversations to look at the state of insecurity in the country and begin to highlight what exactly we can do and who will be responsible for what? I think part of our crisis is the over-centralization of security. The presidentialization of security, where security conversation is now shaped and determined by the Office of the National Security Advisor. It's not about this particular National Security Advisor. It has been the history for a long while. And I think that has taken so many things off the table in terms of what people can can do to improve, because the drivers of this crisis are multiple. And it is not something that we can easily do by bombing, by arming, and killing more people. That has its own limit. It can do to some extent, it can stop them from killing innocent people. It could stop them from the raid and collecting and extorting innocent people. It could do some of those things, but it does not deal with the underlying issue, and it's important for the government to prioritize that. The second, for me, is about our next election. And I think the president's messaging will really help in sending the right signal for the next elections, particularly now that everyone is trooping into the APC. I think the messages of assurance or reassurance to the opposition political parties that the president is not just doing this or encouraging this to undermine the opposition political parties. You see that with the PDP, for instance, those narratives are strong, particularly in PDP, and the role of Wike, in particular as the minister in the president's cabinet. Yes, I am of the opinion that yes, it takes a weak institution for an individual to undermine it. So the PDP is intrinsically weak, and that is why this could happen. But beyond that as well, we can't rule out internal sabotage. And the president needs to create us clarity. It needs to be assurance that he's going to allow for a free, fair, and credible elections, and all that, and support INEC and support its autonomy, particularly now that we have a new chair of the Electoral Commission. That messaging, that consistency, we really help in this conversation. The third one for me is the economy. I think the president should not continue to buy into this argument that the economy has been stabilized, and therefore things are okay. For me, as a student of political economy, I know that economic stability does not actually mean an improvement in the lives of the people, because you are stabilizing in relations to your base, and whether it's month-on-month basis or year-on-year basis, or whatever you use for your analysis is what can actually determine your stability. And so I don't really think, look, the poverty in this country is deep. I am in the field. I walk across different parts of this country.
Yeah.
You can feel it. You can sense it. And that is one of the contributory factors to even this space of violence that we're experiencing in different parts of the country. It doesn't justify it in any way, but if you know the human nature and how we behave, our political economy shapes our actions. It determines our consciousness.
Yeah.
And that determines the kind of actions we take. And so the president needs to pay proper attention to this. And this is not about sharing peanuts and other, as important as some of those relief interventions or social protection systems, as important as they are. But the reality actually has to do with the structure of our economy, and how the economy is designed to actually serve a few. And what are we doing to improve the economy, to make it more inclusive, so that it could take care of the majority of the people, that the poor people are not waiting for gains to percolate from the top. And lastly, and I think this is not based on any order, but I think on the conversation we had on tax, if I were the president, I would actually ask to show that I am a very responsible president, and it is unacceptable for a law to be doctored. Irrespective of how important that law is, I will advise that particular segment, that particular law, we hold on, we investigate properly, and ensure that the right action is taken before we roll it out. That will work. And then it shows that the government is very responsible. It shows that the government will not tolerate such a heinous act. such an assault to our lawmaking process. I think that we need a president that will continue to give confidence to this country that he meant well. And I think that we also need to strengthen this whole relationship with the United States thing. We need to have a clear framework if we need to work with the United States in this matter. I don't really think that it's in the interest of this country. I know people will think differently, and I don't blame them because the crisis of this country have lasted for too long without solution at hand. And I don't blame people who actually want very quick action, even when American history does not show that consistency that it could go into a place and solve the problem of that place by just hitting. But I think a proper framework, a clear decision with proper approval, with clear national understanding and accountability mechanisms will also help. This country has been badly battered. Things are not okay. But it is still the only country that we have, and it should enjoy a certain level of respect and respectability, even when we are on our knees. Recognize that and demand that things are done properly, clear accountability frameworks on this, because it's a country. You don't want to be in a country where anybody can wake up anytime and just bomb element in it. These elements that are causing problems, that are killing innocent people, we need decisive actions against them. There is no excuse, and I will not be part of that excuse in any way at all. I think we need to do every action necessary to deal with it, but it's important that we do that also with dignity.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hussaini Abdu. I really had a very interesting time and enjoyable time having this conversation with you today. Fully subscribe to those 3-4 ideas, that you shared with us also, that the government needs to take the issue of security very, very seriously. The government, especially the president also, should be a big tent president. I know there's been so much about Nigeria becoming a one-party state. It behoves on him of reassurance that it's a competitive politics, and that also, gives credibility and confers greater legitimacy to whatever the outcome of the election will be. If he ends up winning, he enjoys that legitimacy.
Absolutely.
That I still competed and I beat you guys if he wins. Convergence, as you called it, that we need to have, build consensus, because there are structural deficiencies, the existence of Nigeria. And those conversations, or whether the convergence or a conversation or a dialogue, whatever
whatever we call it, but we have to talk to each other.
It's important that we talk to each other. So thank you so much for this time. And to the audience out there, to those who are watching, we would like to hear from you also. Dr. Hussaini has shared some very key elements, key nuggets with us in the course of this conversation today. If you were to have the ears of the government of Nigeria today, wherever you are, what would you ask the government to prioritize? Do you agree that the issue of security, it should be uppermost in the mind of the government? What do you say to the government and to the party in power, to the president, under this cloud of almost a one-party state that, of course, we know we have several parties, but we're talking about the strong opposition parties. What can the president do, to give assurance to the people that indeed he is a Democrat? What should we do? Should Nigeria proceed to have a conversation to really redefine our relationship? And how should we go about that? For spending time, with us today. And if you have come this far watching this video, and you have not subscribed, please subscribe. Join us as we make effort to achieve our first 500 subscribers to this channel. Until I come your way again, I remain yours sincerely, Bodrin Adebo. Have a blessed 2026.